I'd been driving for most of my adult life, but none of those miles prepared me for a winter night when everything you think you know about being alone gets rewritten in an instant. The divorce paper said it all in black and white. Final 3 weeks before the story I'd built was over, and the holidays after felt like a long freight of silence. Trucking had always been my refuge. Moving, listening to the tires, letting the road take the shape of my thoughts. But grief and insomnia compress evenings into sharp little points. I matched with someone on an app that weekend more for company than anything else. A way to push back at the emptiness. I didn't expect chemistry. I expected conversation, a warm meal, a few hours that might make the next shift feel bearable. It didn't go that way. Pittsburgh's South Side and a heavy snowfall felt like a postcard gone wrong. We had coffee and small talk and a polite parting. Her laugh didn't land with me. Neither did her plans. I left before midnight because I couldn't sit with the way the house felt like a stranger's. I chose the shortcut because maps sometimes lie for the better. County Road 17, a slurry of old pavement through trees, patches of no cell service, the kind of road that trims your options down to keep going or keep going. I saw her at roughly 12:15 a.m., and God, she looked out of place even before the blood. She stood barefoot in the lane, jeans shredded, temple plastered crimson. A single steel handcuff clung to her wrist like an answered prayer that had closed on the wrong hand. She raised both hands when my headlights found her, fingers trembling. I killed the engine and sat, my breath fogging the glass. "Please," she said when I stepped out. Her voice was small, high with cold and something raw, fear, maybe grief. "They'll find me if you leave me." My mind flashed every caution I'd ever learned. Don't let strangers in the cab. Don't stop in the middle of nowhere. But the sound of someone breaking in the dark carries a weight I can't unhear. She sagged as if her knees had lost interest. I grabbed the door and pulled her in before she could convince herself otherwise. She kept scanning the trees, fingers tapping the vinyl like she could push the danger away. "Drive," she whispered. Don't stop." I wanted to call the cops before we'd gone 2 miles, but County Road 17 is one of those places where your phone is a useless pebble. The snow made the world flat and quiet. Headlights looked like tiny moons. I pushed the speed up more than I wanted to. 80 felt reckless on ice, but staying felt worse. She clung to the coat rack, whispering that they tracked phones, that they used receivers, that they would see license plates. She sounded like someone who'd been taught to be watched. We finally limped into Red Hollow, a 24-hour station that seemed to exist solely to flicker for drivers' exhausted eyes. The attendant had the kind of face that practices hospitality like a muscle. Polite, distant. I tried the dispatch number and heard the dispatcher's voice trail off about an outage. Transformer problems up the line. The woman's panic rose like a tide. "If they see your truck, run," she said, and before I could reach for her, she bolted out the back door into an impossibly white wall of trees. There's a small logic to the minutes that follow. An SUV slides into the lot like it was carved out of night. Dark paint. 2 men who take up space in a way that reads practiced. One leans out and asks about a girl. His voice is casual, but the look in his eyes isn't. He lingers on the trailer's reflective stripes like someone who reads codes instead of faces. I lie. I say I haven't seen anyone. I point to the road and the weather like a shield. The men drive off only when another vehicle pulls in, as if crowd is safety. I spend the night gripping the wheel in a motel parking lot, replaying the cold look she gave me, a mix of pleading and pure animal survival. The police come the next morning. They're professional, kind, but their answers have the hollow of someone trying to build a bridge out of fog. They pull the security footage, and I watch the lot in black and white, her stumble, the bolt for the trees, the SUV stop, the men scanning. A detective uses the phrase mobile trafficking unit, with more caution than conviction, then tells me they found tracks leading into the wood, but no indication she'd made it out. He mentions a GPS mount in the SUV, Hardware that shouldn't belong on a civilian dashboard. Military-style receivers. He tells me they're checking federal lists. He promises to call if anything turns up. They never do. Days blur into weeks. I keep my roots winter dry and headlight bright. I fill my tank earlier than necessary and choose truck stops with cameras and clerks who make eye contact. Nights, though, are the worst. At certain intersections, under certain streetlights, I see flashes of white in my rearview mirror, lengths of fabric, a bare foot, the hollow catch of someone who didn't find a way out. Maybe it's the way my brain stitches daylight over the memory. Maybe it's nothing more than exhaustion and dread. But the memory of her, the raw, urgent look when she asked me not to leave, sits like a stone in my chest. A couple of days after Red Hollow, detectives call again. They're quieter. We tracked the SUV to a known watch list, one officer says. We pulled a few plates. We've got people looking. That's the official line. There's also the unofficial one, the one you get when you hear the cadence in a cop's voice. Hope is small, and work is vast. After that, nothing. The case goes latent. The world spins. I still drive. Sometimes I imagine different endings. I imagine her wrapped in a thermal blanket at a hospital, furious and warm and far from those men. I imagine her disappearing into the trees toward a farmhouse and a pair of hands that aren't the ones that put cuffs on her. I imagine the worst, too. The kind of ending that settles cold and unanswerable in the back of your skull. None of those imaginings rest when I wake. They only multiply. People tell me to let it go. You did what you could, they say, not unkindly. Maybe they're right. Maybe the moral center of all of it is as mundane as filling your tank before dark and locking your doors. But the moral I carry isn't just about prudence. It's about the small decision that can become your defining moment. Say yes or say no. I said yes that night because being small and human felt heavier than being cautious. Saying yes is messy and hopeful and sometimes dangerous. But I learned that not saying yes can eat at you just as surely. If anything, her look taught me that people on the edges don't come with neat instructions. They come with urgent, broken pieces of story that can't be legislated into safety. The road keeps giving me back the past in the rear view, flickers that make me check my mirrors even when there's nothing there. I still drive winter routes, and my headlight beams have a way of finding the spaces where the world looks most generous to strangers and most willing to hide them. I don't tell myself heroic stories. I tell myself to keep my eyes open, to call when I can, to refuse to let a single night blur into a precedent for silence. Small acts of compassion matter, but so does preparation. Help when you can, wisely, and refuse to let a single choice be the weight that defines the rest of your life. I learned early that trucks keep their own kind of memory. A dented fender remembers a winter that winded you. A cracked taillight remembers a night when headlights vanished into snow. I was 24 the first time the road taught me to be careful. 2 months before the pickup at the farmhouse, my brakes froze on the iron range. Stupid, simple thing. A hairline crack in a line, ice that built faster than the heater could melt it. I slid off the shoulder and spent 4 hours wrapped in my jacket with a space blanket and a thermos someone left me. I watched semis pass with drivers who couldn't see me and felt the cold move like a fist inside my ribs. That night, I vowed I wouldn't be caught unprepared again. Work was steady enough. The depot in Duluth kept us running through freight season, but winter squeezes everyone tight. Fewer drivers, later loads, pressure to make runs no matter what. When the dispatcher called me at midnight on a frigid January night and said, "Ethan, we need a last-minute drop at mile marker 61. I heard in his voice the thinness companies get when payroll is tight. I tried to refuse. I told him about the brake scare, the hours I'd spent brushing snow off my mirrors until I couldn't tell which side of the road I was on. He told me layoffs were on the table if we didn't cover routes. The decision wasn't mine. I took the run. The highway out of Duluth was a ribbon of black glass under my headlights, and by the time I left the interstate, the trees were close enough that the beams made tunnels in the night. My radio puttered with static and a talk show that sounded like ghosts. The GPS flashed a road that had never been on any map I'd used. I felt that old familiar prickle. Work, tiredness, that small stupid part of me that thinks something else will happen this time. I told myself it was superstition, the same way old fishermen swear by tides. Mile marker 61 was past a stretch of county road most locals avoided after dark. The farmhouse came up out of the dark like a thing half buried. Windows iced over, porch sagging, a barn leaning like a man too tired to stand. The lane to the house was lined with mailboxes, some empty, some rusted shut. I could hear a clanging noise behind the barn, metallic and staccato, like chains striking metal. My phone showed no bars. I told myself to get the paperwork, sign, leave. I pulled the trailer close to the porch, grabbed the clipboard, and stepped out. Snow compressed under my boots with that hollow sound. I shouldn't have been nervous. This was routine work, but the farm felt wrong in the way empty places sometimes do, like a room that still remembers whoever left. I rang the bell and backed toward the truck so I could keep an eye on the rig. The door didn't open. I rang again. Nothing. Then the noise from behind the barn changed. Voices, 3 of them, low and quick like a script they'd practiced. My breath fogged and hung in the air. One step closer, and they exploded out from behind the barn like they'd been waiting in shadows. Before I could take my second breath, they were on me. God, the surprise. Hand over my mouth, then down into snow, the cold stealing the breath from me. One of them yanked my keys. Another ripped the trailer door wide enough to shove pallets like they were empty. The third one barked in a voice that smelled of menace and whiskey. "Forget the load. Take the rig." I gave a shout, more reflex than hope, and they were already moving, kicking at the snow, sliding into my cab and peeling away. The truck fishtailed under the streetlights, then disappeared down the road like it belonged to night. I lay there, a red smear on my eyebrow, and the world a tight, distant thing. I tried to stand, legs like rubber, and stumbled toward the highway lights. The numbness in my fingers was obvious. The desperate heat in my gut was louder. I walked until headlights found me. A county patrol car slowed and a cop leaned out. "You all right, son?" he asked. My voice sounded small as I told him. "Stolen. Truck gone." He radioed in, and later they found evidence in the barn. Shredded manifest, another pallet, tire tracks that didn't match anything on the ledger. It wasn't the kind of theft that happened once. They found my rig 2 states over days later. Burned out cigarette butts, VIN plates scratched clean, cargo gone. The depot scrubbed the security footage stat, but a lot of rural yards don't keep cameras, and the ones that do point them where the owner wants them pointed. No faces matched prints, no local witnesses could place anyone near the farm at the right time. The sheriff's office asked questions with tired eyes. "These guys move in packs," one deputy told me quietly. "Professional opportunists. They watch routes. They know what rigs are worth on a back road." I swallowed hard. It made a grim kind of sense. The barn had been bait, a pallet, a fake address, the right kind of cold loneliness to make a driver stop and be alone. I went back to work because the bills didn't stop when your license was gone. Nights on the road became a map of micro decisions: where to stop, where to park, whether to take the well-lit truck stop or the cheaper, darker lot. I started filling up earlier, calling dispatch to reassign me if the drop was rural, refusing runs that smelled like traps. My coworkers noticed. "You look different," my buddy Marco said one shift, loading straps over his shoulder. "Like you got mud under your skin." I laughed it off, but I felt it. The way the memory of those 3 men sat in my chest every time I passed a farmhouse. I'd catch myself scanning silhouettes in snow, counting voices behind porches, checking mirrors for headlights that shouldn't be there. The first winter after it happened, I avoided rural runs. I took overnight work in the city, the kind with apartment complexes and diner-lit lots. I thought distance would cure it, that the world would prove orderly again, but trauma doesn't keep appointments. One night, coming back from a late drop, I passed a farmhouse with a collapsed barn and a mailbox sagging like a tired man. My hands tightened on the wheel without my permission. For a second, the world contracted, the night folding into a memory so sharp I could taste the cold. I slowed without meaning to. The radio played static under a midnight DJ. I drove past, breath held, and the world opened again. There was no one behind that barn, no footprints in the snow, just the same lonely hush I used to think romantic. I pulled into the truck stop and sat with coffee that had gone cold. The soberness of it was simple. We all share the road, and sometimes the road shares back its worst. The depot paid a settlement for the rig. They replaced the load insurance, offered counseling on paper, patched the paperwork and the legal forms. That didn't stitch the nights back together. The lesson sat quiet and blunt. Caution is a living thing. Mercy and bravado are luxuries you trade when your life is on four wheels. I still help people when I can. There's a difference between reckless kindness and smart assistance. But I no longer trust the hush of a back road at night. I check for cameras. I call the numbers on delivery slips. I park in the light. And I never leave my phone out of reach. Those three men taught me that some people learn to hunt by reading the routes others take. They taught me to read the road right back. Kindness on the road is necessary, but it must be guided by vigilance. Small precautions and clear procedures save lives more often than unguarded instincts. I used to think winter made everything neat. Snow covers the mistakes, the world goes quieter, and miles of highway feel like a clean sheet you can write anything on. For a while that was true. I ran refrigerated freight because I liked the solitude, the steady hum of the engine, the way a rig gives you rules and room at the same time. The cab becomes a small, honest life. Coffee, CB chatter, a playlist that knows the turns of your mind better than anyone. But that winter the rules felt thin. My mom was in the hospital in Wyoming. My bills were 2 months behind. The holidays were a reminder of how small I'd let my world shrink. So I kept driving, thinking miles would buy me space to breathe. The storm came on December 23rd like it always does in Montana, sudden and diplomatic. 1 minute the sky was flat iron, the next it was a switch of white so heavy you had to squint at it to remember where the road ended. I pulled off at Horseshoe Ridge truck stop because the advisory said visibility would go south, and because the coffee there is decent and the place had a heat lamp, you can sit under and pretend for a little while that the world is being warmed for you personally. I stepped out, stretched the kink out of my shoulders, and saw him. A pale man standing behind the building, hood up, face inked by the truck stop's sodium lights. He was just watching, not doing anything obvious, but watching the way a man watches a photograph he wants to memorize. "Can I help you, buddy?" I called, because it felt like the polite thing to do, and because sometimes people want directions or a warm cigarette. He didn't answer. He took one step back and melted into shadow. I told myself later I only noticed him because I was already on edge. The injection of worry is tiny and quick. You shrug, climb back into your cab, tell yourself you're tired, and keep rolling. I got back on I-90 with a full tank and a truckload of lettuce and apples wrapped in ice, and the storm put its hand on the windshield like a promise. The highway pinwheeled white. I could barely see the reflectors at first, and then little by little my mirrors began playing tricks. A glint here, a shadow there. I blamed it on reflectors, on a semi's cat eyes. But one glint kept pace with me. It was a car, lights off, keeping the same distance whether I sped or slowed. You learn to ignore things that don't make sense. You keep on. But you test the rules too. I merged. The car matched me. I slowed. It matched me. For miles it shadowed me like an obedient ghost before sliding back into snowfall and disappearing. Around 3:40 a.m., halfway between nowhere and where my mother was, I pulled into a Forest Service rest area, a place I'd used in summers to nap, in winters to wait out lake winds that would tumble into the road. It was a loneliness that truckers know. The rest area sits against a stand of trees that look like stakes in the dark. I killed the engine, wrapped myself in a thermal blanket, and let sleep pull my eyelids low. Fatigue has a soft edge. It pulls you over before you realize teeth are grinding your jaw. A soft, steady tap woke me. Tap, tap, tap. Not on the hood. Not a gust against metal. A rhythm measured against the truck like someone checking to see if the vehicle was real. When I opened my eyes, there was a face at my side window. Eyes huge and unblinking, breath fogging the glass, fingers finding the handle. Recognition is a physical thing. I didn't have to force my memory to him. It hit me like a brick. The man from Horseshoe Ridge, the one who had stood behind the building and watched me as if trying to remember the exact way my ears stick out. He was so close now, his eyelids made a dark rim over the whites of his eyes. The hairs in my neck prickled, and a man who has driven through isolated nights his whole life feels something cold and primitive. This is danger. I banged my fist on the window and shouted, "Get the hell away from my truck!" He jerked and stumbled back as if he'd been caught mid-act. In the exact second he stepped away, a car rolled quietly from behind my trailer, like it had been waiting there all along. Lights off, engine idling low. I thought it was a trick of sleep. I thought it was the cold. Then I reached for my CB and grabbed the microphone so hard my knuckles hurt. T9, this is Heavy 23. Need state troopers to Forest Service pullout. Mile marker 215. Guy trying doors. Repeat, someone was trying my door, I said into the static. The troopers rolled in under 10 minutes, tires whispering against packed snow. They found prints around my rig, loops of footprints pressed into the glowing white. They traced a pattern. Pacing, waiting, approaching. It looked like stalking. The officers asked me question after question, their breath fogging like cigarette smoke in the beam of their flashlights. I gave them my watch time, the place, the way his fingers felt on the handle through the glass. It's a small factual thing. 2 hours, a couple of pumps of hot coffee in the cab, a half hour of rest, and then the human part takes over, the part no one can measure. A detective contacted me a day later with information that made the back of my neck go cold in a different way. There had been other cases in Montana and Idaho, similar patterns. Truckers followed, vehicles with lights off, men pacing around rigs at rest areas. In one case, a driver disappeared. No real theft, no broken windows mostly. Just an intense, quiet attention. The detective looked like someone who had seen the weather of people's lives and knew a storm when it was near. Sometimes these guys don't want money, he said. Not as a clue, but as if he were explaining a kind of weather. Sometimes people just watch. The thing that burned at me more than the frostbite on my fingertips was how intimate his silence felt. He didn't take my wallet. He didn't steal my GPS or my CB. He stood at my truck like a question and tried the handle as if he were asking permission. The absence of purpose felt of a piece with the winter. There was no logic, only an insistence. Why does a person follow another for miles and try a handle and then move away? The detective didn't have answers. He had patterns, not motivations. Patterns are the map. Motivations are the weather you can't predict. I kept driving after that, but the truck doesn't take back what it teaches you. I sleep with the curtains cracked now, not to look out, but so something can't press its eyes against the glass and say, "Here I am." If I stop at a rest area, I park where a deputy could see me if he were to drive by. I keep my CB mic within reach and my doors deadlocked twice. Some things are habit, and some things are armor. Both are small, stoic acts of survival. People ask if I was afraid. You live as a trucker and you carry fear like tools in a toolbox. They need to be there, but you don't want to use them. Yes, I was afraid the way you are when you see a car in a mirror and the driver isn't there when every rule you know says they should be. Afraid because the man looked at me the way someone looks at a photograph they want to keep for later, and because fear that has no reason is the worst kind. It sits in your rib cage and multiplies. It's been seasons since then. My mother got better enough to come home. The bills got shuffled and paid with too many compromises. I still drive. I still like winter because it erases things neatly. But the roads taught me a different lesson than that first clean map of miles. People can be weather too. They come at you without warning. Not all storms are about snow and wind. Some of them are about eyes pressed to glass and questions with no answers. Keeping your guard, but don't let fear make you small. Be prepared, trust your gut, and respect the distance roads give you. Sometimes the safest kindness is keeping moving.
I learned to sleep with one eye open the hard way. 6 years ago out in Wyoming, I woke to the sick scrape of a blade along trailer fabric and a shadow slipping through the gap like it belonged there. I fought until my hands bled and the cold mud swallowed my boots, and I kept the scars as proof that luck can run out fast on an empty highway. After that night, I started carrying a heavy metal flashlight under my seat and sleeping in 10-minute shifts, half dreaming with the cab light on. You get good at small rituals when the road does things to you, checking locks twice, parking under lights if there are any, making sure someone somewhere knows your load. Still, you never really get rid of the memory. It lives in your ribs, in the way your chest tightens when headlights sit at just the wrong distance behind you. That December run was supposed to be routine, pharmaceuticals from here to there, flat rate, paperwork signed. Back before sunrise, Route 93 had turned into an ice ribbon that night. The desert wind cutting like a saw. I felt the truck under me the way a pilot feels a plane, every micro swing, every tug, and that old animal part of me stayed on edge. Around 11:40, I noticed an SUV tailing me. It wasn't close enough to trigger the reflex honk, but it kept that same distance whether I picked up speed or slowed. Passing zones came and went, and it never pulled out. That's the kind of behavior that sets the hair on the back of your neck up straight. I muttered to myself, "Not tonight, please not tonight," and tried to imagine any benign explanation. Maybe some guy trying to keep pace, maybe a tourist. The nights have a way of telling you their own truths, though, through small things that don't comfort you. When I pulled into the rest area, it looked like the kind of place abandoned by luck. 2 busted vending machines sagged under a flickering lamppost, graffiti curling on concrete. The only warmth a thin orange spill from an industrial street lamp. The SUV slid in too and parked at the far edge, headlights dim, engine off. I went through the motions, rolled down, checked tire pressure, made a show of leaning into the wheel wells to seem busy. I locked the cab doors when I finished, climbed into the sleeper, and tried to nap because that's what drivers do. You steal what rest you can. 15 minutes later, the world hummed low and false. An animal noise, the static edge of sleep, and then crunching soft, measured, gravel giving under careful steps. I rolled over and peered out the side mirror. 2 figures crouched at the trailer doors, their heads close together, a muffled click-click like bolt cutters. Time split, then snapped. Instinct slammed me up and out of the bunk. I hit the horn with everything I had. One long, furious blast and lights stabbed the darkness. The intruders jumped like being caught in a spotlight and bolted for the road. The SUV eased in, headlights never on, and swallowed them up. The whole thing looked like choreography, timed, practiced, the way a pack rehearses its moves. I ran the perimeter of the trailer, flashlight swinging. The lock plate was pried, the seal bent out of place. Inside the trailer, the pharmaceutical crates were tossed but mostly intact. Whoever they were, they wanted whatever could be carried fast and sold faster. When the patrol arrived, they took notes like they take everything else. Careful, gray. "This is coordinated," one officer said, looking past me at the empty highway. "These crews ride for miles, follow rigs, wait for the window when the driver finally drops his guard." My voice sounded like someone else's when I told that story into his radio. Weeks after, the image of their coordination haunted me. Not just the bolt cutters, but the way the SUV stayed at a constant, patient distance. The way the 2 men moved like shadows whose timing synchronized with sleeping engines. I replayed little scenes over and over. The precise click of a tool, the muffled thud as one dropped it and ran. The cold that hit me when I realized how close they'd been before I woke. People kept telling me it was business. Thieves adapt to the routes and the season. Law enforcement stretched. Desperate men doing desperate jobs. It was facts presented like an explanation. But facts don't make your hands stop shaking when you check the locks at a truck stop at 3 in the morning. I finished the run. Insurance covered some of the paperwork. The depot put a lock on my load procedures, and there were memos about increased vigilance and reporting strange vehicles. That warm professionalism is useful until you see roadside cameras that don't catch what you remember, until you talk to other drivers in the diner who have their own late-night theft stories that sound like echoes of the same playbook. I traded routes for a while, mostly well-lit, urban deliveries because anxiety makes good company with exhaustion. But avoiding certain roads is only a temporary fix. Hauling meat, or meds, or anything worth a cornerman's interest, the highway always finds you again. Sooner or later, the schedule sets you back on the place where you were vulnerable. Evenings after that night were different. I found myself checking the rear view like I waited for something to arrive, an SUV at a constant distance, shadowy in the wash of my taillights. I learned to park so that the cab faced the entrance, to back into lots whenever possible, to sleep with the keys within reach, and the flashlight in my hand like an extension of my palm. I told myself the rituals were rational. I told myself that preparation equals survival. That's true. But it's also true that the memory of people moving in the dark won't unteach your fear. There's a quiet humiliation to it, this idea that you, a man who's been behind steering wheels for years, can be unsettled by a pair of low-profile headlights and the sound of metal on metal in the night. You carry it anyway. A small, live thing. Not every strange driver is a threat. Humans are messy that way. Some are just tired, some are lost, some have bad maps and worse judgment, but the world isn't obligated to sort them for you. The worst lessons are the practical ones. Never assume distance equals safety. Never let the engine idle when someone's been watching. Never nap without the cab secured. And always keep a line of sight to your trailer seals if you can. I still help people. I still pull over for a stranded driver when the lot is lit and my gut says they're legit. But if I see a vehicle that follows like a shadow, I treat it like a bell at the edge of something dangerous. I stop earlier. I call dispatch. I park in public. The fear taught me protocols that feel clinical, and those protocols saved me from letting luck dictate how my night turned out. Months later, when the desert dark comes and route markers blur into black, I still flinch at the click of a muffled tool. I keep checking mirrors, and when a set of dim headlights sits too still behind me, I imagine the ghost of that SUV steering slow and patient down a ribbon of highway. You learn to live with the memory like an old bruise. You rub it and make it part of your movement. Driving freight is a ledger of small gambles. Time, speed, trust. The thieves that night gambled on me sleeping too long. I walked away, maybe luckier than I deserved. The moral of the highway, if there is one, vigilance is a muscle. You have to exercise it, or it atrophies. The road will remind you with teeth when you stop practicing. In a world where other people's choices can put you at risk, preparedness and cautious kindness matter. Protect yourself with practical safeguards, but don't let fear stop you from doing the right thing when it's safe to do so.